as indicated, I'm going to go through the annexures, which is on the construction regulations, and I'm just going to touch on some basic requirements. I'm glad the speaker before me, to me, did cover most of requirements under the client side and the principal contractor side, so that will just make my presentation much shorter than I originally planned. So the construction regulations, it's applicable for all persons who's involved in construction work. Now, this is a very common question we get in coming to the Department of Labor. Basically, the question is, what we're doing, is it construction work? Is it not construction work? Replacing the valve on the boiler, is that construction work? Painting, is that construction work? So it's obviously very important because if you look at the construction regulation 2, it's the scope of the regulation. So you want to make sure that you fall under the scope in order to adhere to the construction regulations. Now, when you look at the definition of construction work, it's quite basically a comprehensive definition. Now, it includes the construction, erection, alteration, renovation, repair, and it goes on. And it even makes reference to a structure, and a structure is also defined under the construction regulations. So as you can see on the screen, the first part is on building work, and the second part of the definition is on civil engineering work. So from my experience, 95% of the time, if somebody phones in or send me an email and they ask me, is this construction work? As indicated, 95% of the time it is construction work if you read the definition read with structure. So if you are doing construction work, there's obviously requirements and in terms of the construction regulations, if you're doing any construction work for more than 60 million rand, which is on CIDB grading 7 upper limit, you need to apply for a construction work permit. Now, the construction work permit also has other conditions. If you are doing construction work for more than 365 days and 3,600 person days, you also need to apply for a construction work permit. So I just want to iterate the 365 and 3,600 person days goes hand in hand. And then the 60 million rand, if that's a standalone requirement, you obviously need to apply for the construction work permit. Now, the Annexure 1 is a prescribed form to apply for a construction work permit. It's an annexure on the regulation itself, and it's something that you can Google and download as well. Now, if you are a client, remember you have to get an health and safety agent to apply for a permit for you. You cannot apply for a construction work permit if you are not registered with SSCP CMP as an agent. And to a certain extent, a manager, but obviously that's discussion for another time. To me, he's a registered health and safety agent with SSCP CMP. So obviously you need to appoint somebody like Tumi to apply for you if you are a client. Now, as he went through the baseline risk assessment, the health and safety specs, designer reports, and so forth, those are the mandatory requirements for you to apply for the construction work permit. Now, I want to iterate this. Remember, if you're applying for a work permit, I'm advising you guys to please ensure that you get a registered health and safety agent with the SSCP CMP. It is a mandatory requirement on that. So Construction Regulation 7A, it says that the agent should manage the health and safety on the construction project for a client, and the duties imposed on the client applies to an agent. So guys, if you are a client and you appoint an agent to do your construction health and safety responsibilities, it's a very similar delegation like a 16.1 to a 16.2. So the duties imposed on you, it obviously applies to the client. That's if you're the client. The next annexure I want to quickly talk about is the Annexure 2. Now, this is if you're not doing construction work, you're doing work that's less than 60 million rand, less than 365 days, or you have less than 3,600 person days, you need to notify us, the Department of Labor, of your construction work. Now, this notification is submitted by your contractor. Remember, the Annexure 1 is done by the client. It's your permit application. Annexure 2, you need to notify us. And it's if you're doing excavation work, if you're working at heights, so if you're doing demolition, or if you're using explosives to perform construction work. This form must be sent to us 7 days before you do construction work. So I just want to note that two differences, Annexure 1, Annexure 2. And then Tumi also touched about medical certificates. He went into detail about who issues these medical certificates. And he also emphasized that it's for all employees on site. So the medical certificate, it must be under prescribed Annexure 3. Now, this is an annexure on our construction regulations. You can even Google this Annexure 3 on Google, you'll get it. So although your medical practitioner will do a medical certificate for you, the construction regulations go further to indicate it must be under prescribed format. Now, this is a very common contraventions we find on site, that it's not under prescribed format. So Tumi did cover risk assessment as well. So it all goes hand in hand from your baseline risk assessment to your specs. It have to indicate, or you even under your bill of quantities, you have to make provisions for all employees to have medical certificate of fitness. One of the main requirements on the construction site is to comply with the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, which we shortly call COIDA. Now, COIDA is a requirement if you are an employer. If you have one or more worker, you need to register with the Compensation Commissioner. Now, for construction, there's two registrations. We also have another licensed commissioner or licensed fund, which is FEMA, which is Federated Employers Mutual Assurance Company. We call it FEMA. So for us as inspectors and going on site, we want to see either your letter of good standing with the Compensation Commissioner, which is affiliated with the Department of Labor, or with FEMA. So that is one of the very important requirements on site. And we can go on further to even remove people off site or contractors off site if they are not registered with the licensed commissioner. So once you have this, then obviously incidents need to be followed. If you guys have incidents on sites, it needs to be reported accordingly, which we call a WCL2 form. This form as well, you can Google and download as well. It's a prescribed form for reporting incidents, which must be reported within 7 days. So in terms of incident reporting, I want you guys to understand this, the COIDA Act and then the OSHA Act. So there's obviously two types of reporting. We have a OSHA reporting of incidents and we have a COIDA reporting of incidents. Now, this is a very common confusion with people on site, with contractors and clients and stuff. Remember, OSHA Act, Section 24 reporting. COIDA is WCL2 form within 7 days. So it's two separate reporting and it must be differentiated. If you have a health and safety agent or a safety officer on site, they will know these differences as it's part of your requirements you go through when you're registering with SACP-CMP to know these differences between the OSHA Act and the COIDA. Tumi did cover this, the duties of a client. So I've highlighted it on the left-hand column. The legislation is coming from. It's coming from Construction Regulation 5, which we call CR5. And there's a lot of requirements that a client needs to do. Now, as Tumi covered the baseline risk assessment, health and safety specs, if you are doing a construction work that requires a permit, then you obviously have to get a registered agent to do these documents for you. If it's not a construction work permit, it is still a requirement. Remember, then the requirement falls over to a client. So if you're a client, you still need to comply with Construction Regulation 5. And it's highly advisable if you are a client to obviously appoint or get somebody to do these documents for you who's competent enough to do it. So these are your requirements under the duties of a client. That is, if you are a client. So it goes on. Basically, it indicates what you need to do, keep on your file. You need to do audits on your contractor and so forth. So I'm not going to go into detail on that as it was covered quite comprehensively by Tumi. So designer, this is one of the very big requirements on the site is the designer responsibilities. Now remember, if you're a client, you are responsible that the designer carries out his duties. If you look under Construction Regulation 6, his duties are highlighted out there, what he must do. He must do inspections, he must carry stop contractors if you see they are going deviating from the design. And one of the important stuff that we look for after the construction work is a completion certificate issued by the designer. And obviously that goes hand in hand with the occupancy certificate, which is usually issued by your municipality. So your designer responsibilities is very important. Uh, uh, in the morning, somebody did mention geotechnical aspects when we spoke with the NHBRC. Those are all the documents that the designer have to take into consideration in terms of his duties in Construction Regulation 6. So Construction Regulation 6 also talks about temporary works, and temporary works is obviously the responsibility of the designer. Now, the designer goes hand in hand with the client, and temporary works make specific reference with the contractor as well. So if you're a contractor, you have to ensure that the designer carries out his duties in terms of Construction Regulation 6, ensure all the drawings and calculations are on site and made available to an inspector should an inspector come onto site. Duties of a contractor. I know most of you guys are emerging contractors, and Construction Regulation 7 talks about the duties of basically of a contractor. If you are a contractor, Tumi did mention health and safety plan. Remember, your plan has to be approved by the client. Now, if you've got an agent who's representing the client, is just not going to approve any plan. So you have to make sure your plan is in line with the health and safety specs and the baseline risk assessment promulgated by the client. Also, the file, you need to ensure that your file is on site with all your appointments, all your documents, and it should be available to an inspector should he request the file. So one of the important things, if you're a contractor, you have to ensure that you ensure all your employees have medical certificates as indicated earlier around, all your contractors have agreements in place, and each contractor have his file. And if you are a contractor who's appointing a subcontractor, then you also have to make sure that delegation of duties and the contract or your 37.2 agreement is in place so that in terms of incidents, in terms of liability, that's also ironed out. So it's very important for you guys to know if you're a contractor and you're appointing a subcontractor about your delegations of responsibility and accountability. Construction manager, Tumi did cover this. Very importantly, Construction 8.1 indicates that a contractor must appoint a full-time construction manager on site. This is very important. We even issue notices. We can even stop your work if we go on site and we see that you did not appoint a construction manager. So one of the other mandatory appointments is your construction health and safety officer. And remember now, your construction health and safety officer must be registered with SSCP-CMP as a registered construction health and safety officer. One of the other mandatory appointments, if you're a contractor, you must appoint a construction supervisor in terms of Construction 8.7. These appointments must be kept on site, must be on file, must be correctly appointed and delegated. Then we have Construction Regulation 9, which is a risk assessment. Now, your risk assessment is your holistic risk assessment. I don't want you guys to get confused between your baseline risk assessment, which is issued by the client. This is your risk assessment task base for the activities that you're doing on site. It's one of the critical documents an inspector will ask from you if he comes on site. And then also on your risk assessment, you must ensure your employees are trained on your risk assessment, and even your contractors who's you're appointing, they must also be aware and trained on your risk assessment. So that's basically a nutshell from me in terms of construction regulations, basic requirements. Now, when we look at construction regulation 10 onwards, we talk about fall protection plan, we talk about scaffolding, construction vehicles, and so forth. Now, those are more operational requirements. Obviously, if I had time or if I get the opportunity to present or train you guys, I'll go detail into what's required operationally, specifically in terms of the construction work you guys are doing. So basically, this is just my overview of the construction regulations, of COIDA requirements, and I hope you guys obviously took in something that you guys didn't know. And these documents are obviously readily available on Google, on our website, Department of Labor. And now that I know your guys' organization as well, I can obviously forward specific requirement or documents to your guys directly. So thank you guys. That's all from me for today. Thank you.